I just wanted to throw a shout out to CORE for putting this event together. I have mentioned that in the past, thank you. That in the past, I mean, I've done this community events for a number of counties, and this is the most I've ever seen at one of these events. And so, I really think that shows the level of caring and concern that this community has for the people that are suffering from alcohol and drug addiction. And Representative Sprague, I wanted to also mention, or Robbie Bob or whatever, that Representative Robbie Bob, that really he has been a real pioneer in getting a lot of legislation done. This has caught a lot of us flat-footed. This is the opiate epidemic, and this is as bad as I've seen it. Now, I've been doing chemical dependency work for 34 years now. Prior to that, my background is in psychiatry, mental health agencies, particularly the VA hospitals. And I have watched us go from PCP to crack cocaine epidemic to, we had a lot of club drugs, ecstasy, and now we've moved on and graduated to opiates, which has really, I've never seen this many overdoses, this many deaths, this much destruction to communities for any of the other drugs that I've ever worked with. So what I'd like to do is basically explain the problem more from my perspective of what's going on, because people are asking, how can this go on? Can't people see what's happening to our community? Can't they see what's happening to our families and to our health? But there's a real explanation for all of this. And we may never know. I want to start with a very basic definition of addiction. That addiction is the lack of ability to control a behavior. I want to emphasize those words, lack of ability to control a behavior. This is not something that people actually want to do. This is a misnomer. People think, well, you want to get high. Maybe that was true very early on, but that's all. After that, people don't want to get high. People don't want to have to go through this, but yet they find themselves continuing to do this. It's about causes problems in functioning, social functioning, health, well-being. So it's causing problems in their lives. It involves obsession. And when I say obsession, that does not mean someone's thinking about the drug use 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What that means is there are times where they can think of absolutely nothing else except getting high or getting the drug. Which brings us to the dis-ease when not using, or when it's unavailable. It's more, the interesting thing about opiates is people can get really anxious, highly stressed, when they're waiting for their next dose or not knowing where it is. People who are perfectly stable at the moment are very concerned. When am I going to, I don't have any left, I only have 5 pills left, what am I going to do? And so it gets to be all-consuming in their lives, to the point where they're willing to sacrifice their health and their reputations and then their education and then their jobs and their families and eventually their friends, just to maintain this habit. Okay. So the greatest problem we have working with addicts is our expectations of what we believe they can do. It is very helpful to always assume that the addict is always doing the best that they can, unlike this remote. Okay. It's important to understand they're always doing the best we can. When we get frustrated with an alcoholic or an addict, I think that the concern is all misplaced, because it is our expectations that are the problem, and that's what I want to talk about. Because let's look at what this whole situation really is. If I want to explain the drug epidemic, I can do it with this. This is a single-cell organism. It does not have a brain, it does not have a nervous system. but yet you'll notice that it continues to move toward the light. The goal of all life is just to improve its condition and its situation. It wants to feel better in whatever way possible. So when you think of every cell in our bodies have the same purpose, is to feel better, then you understand that that is really our primary motivation. And a lot of times when we direct that, it's to the good. It is to improve our situation. But in many cases, it becomes destructive. So we look at how we behave. We look at our motivations, and we realize that all of our experience is completely located inside of our brains. That means everything we think, everything we sense and feel, all of our emotions, all of our memories, they're all located inside of our brains. I mean, I think it's real interesting when we talk about our senses being in our brains and we living within our brains. When I'm doing this, I don't feel this with my finger. There's no feeling until the impulse that starts from here shows up approximately here on this side of my brain. All my brain's intact, my nerves are intact, but if you cut that signal off, I don't feel anything. Now, when I worked in the VA hospital, I was working primarily with returning Vietnam vets. And they will tell you there are days when they can feel pain in a foot when they didn't even have a leg. The reason is that the reality of the limb is in the brain, not in the leg. So if my brain is telling me I have pain in a foot, it doesn't matter whether I have a leg or not. So we come to realize that all of reality is in my brain. Anybody see the movie The Matrix? Anybody willing to admit that they saw the brain? Not the third one, the first one. That's what it is. Reality is what our brains tell us it is, not what the physics are out there. So no two people actually live in the same reality. Well, this gets kind of heady. But that's true. We don't see things the same, we don't hear things the same, we don't have the same goals, we don't have the same motivations. So, we look at what makes the brain work. And we realize that the brain is chemical. There are no moving parts inside the brain. So in order for my brain to operate, you have to start a signal moving across a nerve cell or a membrane. So when I do this, it starts a chain reaction of events. It's basically sending a pulse up a neuron. So it's like taking a rope and just snapping it and sending a pulse. That cell is end loaded with a chemical we call neurotransmitters. It can be one of many. It can be dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. It gets pushed out into the opening we call a synapse. Nerve cells do not touch. But there are receptor sites on the other cell that are sensitive to that molecule. So you have receptor sites that take on those cells. They change the polarity of the membrane from negative to positive or positive to negative. That causes the signal to continue on down the new cell. It repels the neurotransmitter back out of the synapse where there are uptake pumps that pull it back. It's just fire, back, fire, back.